Welcome everybody to the Chapter 69 edition of A Cast on Titan. Today we're going to talk about everything in this chapter and how awesome or not awesome it may or may not have been. As always, we're going to introduce ourselves, and we'll give the disclaimer early this month to say that this is exclusively a manga spoilers podcast, meaning that if you are not up to date with the Chapter 69 chapter, you do not want to be here for the rest of this podcast. Come back later.
Maybe you do.
I mean, you could be here if you want to be spoiled, but otherwise, you should probably leave and come back.
We don't want you here.
We do, but not right now, if you haven't read the chapter. Let's go ahead and introduce ourselves, starting with normal rotation.
We're so organized.
It's all in post-production. That's where this is going to go.
Oh, God.
Hi, I'm Sky, also SkyV23 from the subreddit, and I think this was an okay chapter for what it was.
See you guys next month.
Real in depth.
No, well, that's what we do, like our very first impression, and then we'll go into impressions afterwards.
No, I'm not saying.
Isn't it the same?
I'm not saying you did.
I usually go a little more in depth.
I'm not saying you did it wrong. I'm saying that that's what the entire podcast is going to be.
Yeah.
So,
kind of sums up the vibe.
Zach, go ahead.
I'm Zach, Darth Mewtwo from the subreddit. I'm one of the select few elite moderators.
Don't call us elite. We're not elite.
Hey, we're the fan favorites. That's how we got in, right?
I'm a fan favorite. You're not.
Hey, I came in second place.
It's not a technicality.
Second place is worst place, man. Come on.
That's
better than the 36,000 other members who didn't get chosen.
Yeah, well.
So,
Well, you still have a job to do, and they don't, so it's fine.
True. Anyways, I am one of the apparently not so elite moderators of the subreddit. Normally I'm a yes man and say, I love this chapter. This chapter is great. It wasn't.
Yeah, it's really surprising because I, understood you to be actually a Kenny fan, so that's a little...
I was.
Was is a good word.
Am.
We'll get into that a little bit later.
I was a Kenny fan while he was alive.
I am Stiller3 from the subreddit. I am one of the other moderators. This chapter was, like Scotty, I was not blown away by this chapter. So, it was not the worst thing in the world. It was okay. It was decent, you know. But we'll talk about some of the development that I'm not going to say the word yet, but they gave Kenny a lot of development in this chapter. We'll go into that a little later. That sort of hurt how this chapter played off to me. So, I would say it's about average, if not lower.
I would say that in terms of the feel of this chapter,
I would say it was Ryan's turn.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm Ryan. You guys may know me as WX Bombbill from the subreddit. And overall, yeah, it wasn't the best chapter in the world, but I'm a Kenny fan, and it was a Kenny heavy chapter, so I was pretty happy in the end with it. A little upset to the fact that he's gone now, but all in all, it was, I think, just a bit better than average, but it was nothing particularly special.
Awesome. So that's all of us, and we went ahead and we already gave our impressions for this chapter, so we're just going to go ahead and dive right in there and go over what happened in this chapter, starting from the beginning.
Oh my god, they killed Kenny! The bastards!
And that takes us up to about page 45.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Be prepared to hear that joke a lot tonight.
I'm sure.
The best news about this chapter is that after it's over, after we're done with the podcast here, we don't have to hear any more 69 jokes. We don't have to hear any more Kenny's dead, you killed Kenny, you bastard jokes. None of that. It's all gone forever. Done. We can move on.
The bright future.
A fucking gleaming, shining existence we're moving towards.
And on the bright side, we can finally say that they killed off a major character in the series.
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider him.
I love the guy, but
Let's back up a little bit.
And he was a main villain for 20 chapters here.
Villain for a minute.
Yeah, he had the cowboy chapter, the shootout in the city. Besides that, he wasn't really a main villain. I wouldn't consider him. But in terms of the feel of the chapter, I definitely got the same vibe that I got with way back when the chapter before Annie was introduced as the female Titan. Not when we first saw her as the female Titan, but when she was in the city and transformed, when they cornered her.
Right.
That chapter with how they introduced her and her thought process and all of that, it was very reminiscent of that. I got that vibe in this chapter as well.
I mean, I could see that, but if you go that route with it, Kenny got a lot more actual scenes out of that than she did.
Yeah, and I would expect him to, also, because, like, she's still alive, whereas this was, like, his last hurrah, you know?
That's true.
Well, plus, and at this point in the story, this has a lot of plot relevance, because it's not just about Kenny. Half of this is about, how do you pronounce it? Is it Uri or Yuri?
Yuri.
Yuri?
I just say Yuri, yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's as much about him as it is about Kenny.
I'd say it's even more about Levi.
It's a decent amount about Levi.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with his backstory, too.
Nobody got more out of it than Kenny did, though. Because this was his send-off. This was his swan song.
Well, the chapter as a whole, it felt like more of an epilogue to the last arc than anything else to me. And as a result, I feel like all this information, this basically one giant flashback of a chapter, was necessary to kind of fill in some of the gaps that had been left open, from this last arc. And now we can at least, this is closed down, we can move on.
Yeah, I was about to say, this is more of an offshoot, because the chapter's title is Friends. This almost has nothing to do with the last chapter. This is almost like you say, like a stopgap or a placeholder. Fill in some of the information we didn't get while all of this stuff was going on in the past.
It's even more like the chapter in the Stoics district, then.
Kind of. The difference being that, like Scotty mentioned, because Annie's still alive, and she's probably coming back, we didn't get all of the information for her.
Yeah.
Kenny, we got... Basically, looking at this chapter, I made the joke like it took 30-some-odd pages. That's accurate. That happened. And it's because we basically got his life story here in chronological order at a certain point.
And it was honestly, like, for what it was, even though I would consider this, much like that Annie chapter, somewhat of a filler in a sense, although it was important for sure, like you had to watch it to kind of get the full picture, it still felt like, okay, this is a stoppage in the plot progression, and we're just going to go over some material that you didn't know previous, and now we're just, tie that little nice ribbon and then send Kenny off. So I feel like for what it was done in a very nice way, and I was definitely intrigued the entire way through the chapter.
I know a lot of people don't care that much about Kenny, but...
And I say, fuck you.
But this can't be called a filler just because this is super important for, as Ryan mentioned, Levi and Uri.
Yeah, it just had that feel though.
Like just Levi being one of the main protagonists, being the most popular character and being chief dog of all the characters. Him getting as much as he did out of this chapter is what made this sort of important at all.
Both
really.
Character development and weight-wise.
Yeah. Without that development for Levi, my impression of this chapter would have gone down even further. Because I'm part of that group that really didn't care about Kenny that much. Like, he went, I think we said it in the last podcast or the one before, where his arc kind of went a sine wave. Where he started out as a fucking shitbird and nobody cared about him, nobody liked him except for Zach. Then he had his little redemption.
I thought Kenny was
He had his little redemption moment where everyone was like, he's not that bad. Now we're back to here where it's, he's dead. Who cares?
I care.
Well, Kenny, I always liked Kenny because he was a breath of fresh air compared to a lot of the other characters. He had more personality than most of them do.
He was picking
and
up...
even if he was a little goofy and, kind of a little off the norm, playful almost, he'd come in and crack jokes at inappropriate times.
He was picking up the slack for Hanji and Connie and Sasha and everyone else who's normally he was the fill-in for like 4 characters who were supposed to be doing that, and they all kind of fucked off, so that became his job.
I guess that means they'll be going back to Goofy Hanji soon.
Probably. She's probably...
I did enjoy his attitude I enjoyed his attitude. He was essentially, he didn't care, essentially, you know what I mean? He went in and he kind of said what he thought and did his own thing, and he wasn't really bound by what everybody else was. Yuri was the only person who really ever had his respect in that regard. And then that's kind of what this chapter was about. It was much of a friendship as much as anything else that he was serving him. And then once Yuri died, passed on, it wasn't the same anymore. So it seemed like from that point, Kenny had gone on and become his own person, and it was nice to see somebody who was seemed to be outside the realm of control of everybody else. He came in and just kind of threw a wrench in everybody's works, did his own thing, and that was nice, a bit refreshing compared to some of the other characters who are kind of locked down by what they feel they're compelled to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, this is a character that I don't have a lot of interest in. I don't care that much about this character, so I'm not as prone to going in depth on a character like this as I normally would. Thus, I have such an opposing viewpoint, because to me, I look at this chapter and I'm almost below average on this chapter just because all of this development for him feels like it was shoehorned so badly because he died in this chapter. It was just like, hey, we need to fill all this information in real quick before he gets out. Otherwise, this will be sort of a loose end,
Yeah, that's a fair point to make. It essentially did feel, because like I said, the whole chapter is basically one big flashback, and it seems like, unlike Historia, which essentially she got a whole arc or two devoted to her development.
If you compare the two, look how rushed this chapter was compared to Historia, who's been having development moments throughout chapters since like 30s, and his is like, we got this chapter, which was huge, and we got like one or two other chapters you can point to a couple significant moments, and that's it. Now you could say that's just because Kenny's minor character, he shouldn't get that much, but I don't know. I just really don't like the shoehorning. It's too much. I think we should have spread it out a little bit more. But then again, I don't really care about this character, like I said. So, I mean, if we didn't do it at all, I'm not the one who would cry foul. So someone else would have to do that for me.
What was interesting about this chapter, and it kind of bugged me about Kenny's death here, is that, we always talk about how major characters really haven't died in a long time, or even that many minor characters. There hasn't been a lot of major deaths in recent history. Well, with Kenny, it's interesting because I feel like he died because he outlived his plot relevance.
He's not the first.
Yeah, well, it's the thing where now that he's gotten the Ackerman question out of the way, that Levi knows about that, and now that Rod's dead and that whole arc is tied up, he has no more purpose, or at least any relevance to the plot. So it's either an option of Isayama can let him run around and keep doing his own thing, who knows where he'll pop up, kind of as a lone wolf and just kind of mess things up, or he can kill him off this chapter, and tie up that end completely because we're never going to see him again, which seems a little odd because we were talking about this last month, how so much of the show has been, or so much of the series has been devoted to, I guess, the idea that, anybody can die at any time, the idea, the unpredictability about that. So I feel like it's been trying to make its mark that plot relevance isn't necessarily a token that's going to keep you alive or dead. But here, that's the only real reason I can think of why he was killed off, because otherwise, there's no point in having him around. So, it'd be easier just to kill him off and kill off his whole crew in one fell swoop than to do anything else with it. So I'm not going to point fingers and say it's lazy of him to write it that way, but it did seem a bit jarring compared to some of the other big deaths we've seen.
I do like the question that you had in there that you almost pitched, which was, if we presented this scenario as, at the end of this chapter, Kenny either dies or he vanishes somewhere inside the wall and becomes like a rogue sort of underground figure again, and we just never hear from him again, which is the better option?
Yeah. I don't
know. Because I kind of feel like if you let him just fuck off and never come back and just sort of give him the closure that says that he's just going to kind of, ponder the outlook and the whatever about this for the rest of his life. Is that better than him just dying? Because did we get a lot from him dying, really? Other than Levi's reaction, I guess?
You are both ignoring a third potential option, which is Kenny comes back in a bigger way and becomes a new major player, major villain.
He steps above the jobber standard. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm looking at this with the perspective of someone pretty much in between you, Stiller, and both you, Zach and Ryan, where it's like, I give like half a shit about him. Not a full shit. Not no shits, but I give like half a shit. And I would say I liked his progression. And at first, we saw him in the slums in the underground city, and he just cared for himself, But then once Yuri gave him some sense of like responsibility and power, he actually started to do, align more so with a group, affiliate himself with military police. Although he was doing his own thing, he used that more so as just like a cover and an excuse to do whatever he wanted. It was still like he had a path. He seemed like he was going down a specific route. And at the very end, when he died, he gave up the option to become a Titan, because he's like, I realize that everyone's striving for something. Everyone is striving, and drunk on something, whether it's actual, like, alcohol, whether it's power, whether it's, like, responsibility towards some affiliation or group. And he just didn't want to go through that anymore. He's like, I'm just going to die my own person, on my own volition, not trying to reach for some, like, hanging fruit. And I feel like that is much more of a closure to a story than, my plan didn't work out, I'm going to go back to the city and just kill people. It's like, he didn't really do anything with that plot progression of his own story if that goes down that route. So I'm glad that they just ended it and killed him off, because it seems like he made that choice himself. So it was more of a complete end.
It might just be a subjective thing to what you want to see, because Like, that description to me sounds like it's overclosure, like it's storybook, like non-realistic style of, oh, I resolved everything that I wanted to resolve in my life before I died.
Well, but he didn't, though. Like, his ultimate goal was to become the God Titan if he couldn't do it.
Right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, he came to terms with them in the situation he was faced with.
I would have rather he lived on and sort of had to come to the, life goes on sort of concept instead of like wrapping his story with a neat little bow after he made his peace with all of his problems. But like I said, that just might be a subjective thing. That's my taste, I guess, versus what your taste is, and that might not be a thing we can agree on. I don't think Zach's right at all, though.
But at that point, I really don't think that point is accurate.
Because him becoming a major player would be such a
it would go against his character, to be honest.
To pull off, because he's not got such a popular reception. Like, he's not such a popular character right now that actually trying to make him the next big thing would not go over well. And I don't think this sort of path of thinking ever crossed Isayama's mind, and I'm glad it didn't. But going that route with Kenny, I don't think would have worked out in the end, just because he's not big bad material, I don't think. And that's because you made him a gray character. The way that Scotty built Kenny's closure, to me, screams that, hey, we made this guy a gray character so that he would have a little bit of appeal before he died, so that somebody might care about him.
Yeah.
I had a lot of sympathy for Kenny. And I've noticed, actually, with a few different characters, this has happened a few times in the series, where Isayama will open up showing you a character from one person's perspective, from one side's perspective, and it, like, when Kenny first appeared, he was all bad. It looked like he was the bad guy out to kill everybody, because you were seeing it from Levi's perspective. And then as we get farther into the story, more facts come out, it opens up, and all of a sudden, like you said, that gray area opens up like pretty much every character we have in the series. And it helps you develop some sympathy towards the end of it. Because at first you're like, oh, this guy's a douchebag. We don't, what's his point? He just seems like a prototypical, antagonist. But yeah, once we get more information about it and it opens up and you realize it's not quite that clear, and you start seeing it from other people's perspective, from Rod's perspective, from Yuri's perspective, from his own perspective, then we get a bit better idea about his character. And yeah, I definitely had some sympathy for it at the end. I think that it was understandable what his goals were and what he was trying to do, especially based on his circumstances earlier in life, which again only are revealed in the last few chapters here.
I have no doubt that he's a sympathetic character, but I mean, making him a character, making him someone that we care about, would have taken a lot more effort at getting us to invest early on than we had, because the plan was to, like you say, start him out bad and then eventually make him a great character. That's a long-term investment strategy that doesn't really pan out when he doesn't have that much time in the series. You know what I mean? Like, he's such a short-lived character that plan isn't one that's good for, like, fan retention, I would say,
Yeah, that's a fair point to make, because, I mean, yeah, from start to finish, it was a very short amount of time relative to the whole series that we got to really explore Kenny, compared to especially a lot of other characters, too.
You know what? He is sympathetic. I get it. I sympathize with sort of what he was trying to overcome and all that shit, because I don't want to really try and go too deep into it, because I don't really invest too much in sort of where his character went. But he did play a pretty significant role in the story, I think. So he's not totally worthless, but he's not super significant.
He played a big role in this last arc. It almost seemed like he was a vehicle for Levi's development as much as anything else. He was he was a linchpin in this whole Rod arc with all that, because it was necessary with the kidnapping and X, Y, and Z. But yeah, it seems like going down the road, especially after this last chapter, his lasting legacy on the series is going to be how Levi takes it from here.
It's definitely going to be big for Levi. Speaking of which, I think Levi had gotten a lot from this chapter, like we had mentioned earlier. But I'm honestly surprised that we're starting to get to the point now that I thought we would never reach, where a character like Levi or Mikasa is actually getting some attention given to them as far as their background goes. Now, I never hated Levi as much as I hated Mikasa, but I'm really interested in sort of where this development for Levi is taking him. He's actually becoming more and more of an actual character, and I'm surprised by that. Yeah.
Human.
we're not
I'm really
there
surprised
yet.
at the very
We're
end.
not there
how
yet, but we're
we
getting
saw like, well, I mean, we're not there yet, but the fact that he smiled at the end and he was like, thanks, like he actually thanked the 104th Squad. It's like, wow, like he's actually got some emotions behind that huge wall, that barrier suppressing them all. So it's like, you know, I really am happy and just really want to see where this leads, you know, for his character. I mean, I don't want him to get too emotional and to become like, I don't know, one of those characters that, oh, he was like so close, and now that he's just like let out his emotions, now he's gonna be, you know, out there with it. Like, obviously that won't happen like immediately, but I still hope that he's more so conservative and then just, you know, slowly but surely lets out little bits of emotions.
Exactly.
Instead of
He's
just,
getting
you know,
so much better because we're so used to him being so like into himself and like suppressing all his inner emotions and whatnot. Now the slow like release of all this, that he's starting to become a more expressive character a little bit, that is awesome. If he becomes more and more, to a certain extent, like you said, expressive character, that's only going to be better for him, because you see him like that like completes an arc for him, coming from being a totally internalized character to one who is actually able to express something every now and again. And like we're seeing in this chapter, he's getting a little bit of background development that's sort of filling in some of the holes in his character. He's coming along nicely, which is satisfying to say, even if I have to eat a little bit of crow that I never thought we'd get to this point. I'm happy. I'm happy
for
with
you.
that. I'm okay with that.
Well, I agree, and it's the timing wise with relation to the overarching story as a whole is interesting, because we're at a point in the story where I feel like the tide's kind of turning. You know, this whole story up to this point has been bad things happening after bad things, and finally, you know, this last arc has been, you know, one of the big victories for our team. You know, they stopped Rod. Historia's been coronated. She's gonna be the queen now, so everything's you know, at least looking up in the near term. And it's interesting with Levi because, you know, a big reason that he put in that kind of stonewall expression and lack of emotion for most of it is for self-preservation, you know, survival, to be able to survive in that environment, and in order to keep his troops alive as well, the people serving under him. That's why he took that attitude. So it's interesting that we're getting this development. He's starting to become more expressive as the story as a whole starts taking kind of a big major turn, at least towards positive things. You know, it might be a case where at least he feels he can is a little safer to be opening up. But this chapter is a good example showing his background, how the reasons why he would get into that, especially in a situation where he was as a kid. You see him, you know, beating that guy with the knife to survive, or whatever situation it was in. Kind of backs that up, because it shows that in that environment, yeah, you'd have to have that stoic kind of emotionless attitude in order to survive in that environment. So it is, like you said, very cool that he's starting to open up a little bit. And I think it reflects the change in scenery as a whole that the story is going through.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I liked about this chapter in respects to Levi is how Isayama's choice of setting in the underground district and the style of buildings and everything basically does confirm the No Regrets story as... Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say confirm it as canon, but it definitely goes a step in saying that it's compatible with the main story.
Yeah, nice.
Anyone?
Okay, sure.
Screw you, Stiller.
I agree. It looked like the same scenery, so at least he was going along the same lines with it.
Yeah, I take the same approach to that as I do with Kenny, which is like, I don't hate these characters, but I'm not so invested in them that I'm going to take a point like that and weigh in with it, because that's not my realm. That's not my forte. You know what I mean? I would leave that to more people who are more invested in those characters than I am. Because if I comment on that, it'll just sound like, you know, nothing. It'll have no weight to it. But if Ryan or Zach weigh in on it, they actually don't have such a apathetic approach to those characters, you know?
Well, I've been critical of Levi in the past, and I still don't think he's one of the best characters in the series, that's for sure. But he's growing on me. Like you said, this is a big step for him as far as his development goes. And it goes a long way for me, at least making him a lot more likable, because, yeah, he was not anywhere near the top of characters I really cared about up until recently. And even now, he's not up there, but so I'm probably not qualified to be making these statements either. The same thing what you're saying, but it is definitely improving. That's for sure.
Is there anything else to talk about?
He's got the serum now.
Nah, but I don't think that's even a special serum. It's just one of the serums out of Rod's bag. But as far as we know, it wasn't labeled, so it's probably...
There was a label. I don't think we've gotten a translation on it yet.
Well, if there's some significance to the label, then I'll take back this statement.
There is a wrapping behind on the bottle.
I'm asking Minka if there's a translation right now.
I would just assume that was, like, for story purposes to be like, I'm going to be, become a mindless titan, and I'll just live like that because I want to preserve my life with any means necessary. Just to be, like, symbolic of his will to continue on, even throughout, harsh times, and even when he should die, like, there's still one way out. Because it feels like this great, huge, gigantic, like, monster titan like Rob had. I feel like that would have been just horrible for the story, because we've already went through that. We don't need a 2.0 Kenny version.
So I'm wondering, looking at this again, because Uri was in this chapter, Friday was in this chapter, I think Rod was in here somewhere. He was. I know we talked about earlier how this is kind of an offshoot chapter, sort of a conclusive sort of chapter about one of the characters. Are we also concluding the Rice family story here as well?
Well, Historia is the only remaining member, so...
I don't think so, and here's why. I don't think we're giving... I'm looking over this again, and I don't think we're giving this chapter enough due diligence with regard to how important it actually is, because I'm looking through the interactions between Kenny and Uri here, and going forward in the future, it's going to have a lot of relevance, mainly because of the First King, and that whole storyline that goes with it. I mean, I'm looking at the specific section here where he essentially says, and not so often in the future here, the world must end, and in the aftermath, I'm going to build a paradise, is basically what he's saying. And there's a couple other things he says throughout it at different times, but it basically is given a lot more insight into this whole First King coordinate carrier dynamic, and how that's going to affect Eren now going forward, because he's now the one who has the First King in him, essentially. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We think he has it, but the king's not active because he's not Rice.
So there's likely a fair bit of foreshadowing in here for what's going to happen in the future. It's pretty vague, I'll be honest, but I think when we look back in 10 or 15 chapters, we're going to say, oh man, this was giving away a lot more stuff than we were necessarily thinking at the time.
Eren potentially having that influence from the First King, I'm praying that because Historia is the only one left at this point, that whole thing with the First King and Rod and all of that plan bullshit that I didn't reread, that I should have, just kind of goes away, because I don't want that to come back. I don't want that to carry forward.
Well, that's the problem. It can't go away yet, though, because the issue is that Eren's still learning how to use his coordinate power. And now we have the issue with, how much influence is the First King on him, if any, and how that's going to affect him using his power. And now that, does he have the hardening ability still, now that that's thrown into the mix? So there's a whole lot of new questions that have opened up as far as what he can and can't do and how much of an impact this is going to have. So I think this does have a lot of relevance, and it's going to be almost directly applicable to whatever Eren's going to have to go through, whatever personal struggle he'll have to deal with regard to the First King.
I think
in the
only
near
either
future.
2 or 3 chapters with Hanji where they're actually training Eren and having a little bit of a out.
I agree. They seem boring.
Yeah,
we have those chapters. We can drive this into the ground and be done with this forever.
No, I would go back to Ryan's point. I'm kind of with you on this, Ryan. I think that what's going to happen, and what I think is going to be really cool if they can pull it off correctly, is we all got the sense from all of these chapters that the will of the First King overrides everybody who has the full power. So all of the Rices that have had this power, when they get it, they become, complacent. They don't want to change it. They want to keep the status quo, everyone in the walls. And because of this, they have all of this power, and the irony is that they don't feel the need to use it because of the will. Now, I feel like Eren can kind of sidestep this entire will because he doesn't have the full effect. He's not a Rice, so the will of the First King isn't affecting him fully. But we've seen already that Eren experiences some of the powers of the coordinate power when he stopped the Titan and controlled them all to attack Reiner. So when that happened, we can see that he might be on a scale where the more involved he gets, the more powerful he gets, the more honed in with the coordinate power he becomes, he might get more abilities. He might understand the information that all of the other predecessors of him experienced, and maybe he will be able to sidestep the will and actually be able to share this information in due time. And this will be a way to kind of get rid of, the will of the first king kind of makes everyone complacent. It's like, yeah, but Eren kind of is out of the loop in terms of that influence.
Possible, those moments where we've seen Eren trying to use some of his abilities where he, gets too attached to the Titan and starts to lose himself inside the Titan? You know those moments? I'm wondering, is it possible that somehow the first king's influence on making Eren sort of lose control of himself?
I doubt it. I think if you just shift too many times, then you start to lose.
Yeah, it seemed like
control.
That was like a physiological repercussion.
Eren got a nosebleed after he shifted to block the cannonball. So the reason he lost control the next time he shifted is because he still hadn't fully recuperated.
Couldn't it be the most subtle takeover attempt ever by a ghost?
No, that's so. But I would think
Titans are haunted. Oh boy.
Oh, there we go. I think
anyways
would be much more.
Mika just got back to me. The bottle does say normal Titan, so nothing too big.
Hold it.
One question I just came up with that isn't exactly pertinent with this chapter, but it still is a big question, is that Reiner and friends know about the coordinate and know what it can be used for. So that means they must have some idea of the fact that the first king controls people. And that might go back to what Reiner said. Eren's the worst possible person that could have that power because he isn't controlled by the first king's ideology. Does that mean that they might possibly have a way to get around it or something?
The series has placed a very big importance on bloodlines. And, it's possible that if it's true that Eren doesn't have any rice blood in him, the only examples we've seen of the first king have been passed down through rices exclusively. So we've actually never seen any evidence of, until Eren here, of the first king being present in someone who isn't a rice, supposedly. And if that's the case, maybe that is the workaround that Scott was talking about. Maybe that is the key. The first king only has, the influence over that of his own blood. Or at least less influence over somebody else, and they just don't know it yet because they've never come across that situation before. So it's definitely an interesting thing to look at.
I'm thinking that Reiner and company are thinking that they don't want Eren to have it because they are more confident in their own abilities as having more experience in being trained shifters. They know what they're doing. So the coordinate being in their possession, them having that sort of power would be better for them to try and handle than Eren.
Or maybe just because they know how much Eren hates the Titans, and he'd probably go against that.
That, or it's what Ryan said, there might be some sort of secret village, They sacrifice.
It could be. It could be part of all of it.
We do have to remember that the bottle Eren ate said Brown on it, Braun. So there's definitely some connection between Reiner's family and the Rices.
I'd really rather we don't go to the bloodlines thing. I'd rather it be something else entirely.
Piss off. It's a thing, get over it. It's not going to go away,
I'd
Stiller.
lean towards your side, Stiller. That's, even though I think that's a possibility, I would prefer it not to be the case.
Yeah, I guess that's the end of that.
Actually, wait a second. So, if Stiller... There's a possible reconciliation here. Uri knew somehow that the walls were going to fall soon, right? So what if...
He never explicitly states it, but he does...
a calamity. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what if the reason that the bottle said Brown is that the Rices were the ones who trained and sent Reiner and Berthold to the wall for whatever reason?
Why?
Like an offshoot of the Rices, like a different branch of the family outside the walls,
or maybe Rod was acting on his own and using it as a way to try and circumvent the first king. Like if the wall falls, the first king would be forced to do something.
But he didn't expect Grisha to come and eat his daughter.
Sort of like they're a covert on the team, sort of as a contingency plan.
Yeah,
that would be interesting.
I'm gonna go.
It's. I don't know if I totally agree with it, but it's definitely an interesting thought.
I don't buy it just because the concept of the village of shifters is a better idea, I think, than team specifically meant for Rice's contingency.
Well, and it gets messy when we start talking about the dude, because now we've got not only RBA's village, we've got Ymir, we've got Monkey Trouble.
That wouldn't even include Ymir.
Yeah, so there's like a whole other slew of things out there that makes this a lot more complicated with the limited information we have.
Get to the next arc.
My goodness, we better get back to those shifters soon because this is.
Please, for the love of God,
we're in dire need of that.
And when the fuck is that new character going to be introduced? Seriously,
the last
we were told 6 months ago This is new character. He will be soon. And we have not seen him.
Who told you this?
Ishiyama is the
What
best.
information?
Oh my god.
I wouldn't trust information from someone who sounds like that. I don't think they're very
Exactly.
credible.
It makes sense that we haven't seen him yet, though, because he was introduced in the middle of this last arc. Or, I mean, it was shown, it revealed at the middle of this last arc, so it's not surprising that he's not going to show up until this next arc, or at least the one after.
I mean, he was blonde, right?
He was a black and white sketch on a piece of paper.
Yeah, I don't think he had hair color.
So yeah, blonde, definitely blue eyes. Too,
Yeah.
right?
Shut up. It's either they're shaded or they're not.
What color is
Shades of
shaded
gray.
though?
It's a shade. That's what it
Either
is.
way.
Shaded could be blue.
Maybe it
for
was
all
just
you
a
know.
very, very early design of Uri, and Isayama decided to scrap the glasses for whatever
Did you
reason.
know that
Anyways.
shaded hairstyle means it's fuchsia? I like the idea of Russian Isayama protecting the Russian skies with his manga. So,
What do you think? Oh, I was gonna just say like what do you think's gonna be the next
Arc.
villain or the next? I guess the next arc, but like the next.
I mean,
Antagonist.
where I was going to
Antagonist,
go
yeah,
next
thank
is
you.
to talk about Historia, because she was in this chapter too, even though it's briefly. Like where she's going to be leading us in the next arc. Because she's at this, like, from now on, she's going to be playing a huge part in whatever's going on. Either that, or she's going away, and we're not going to hear from her again for a while because she's doing paperwork.
No. That would be really
You
disappointing.
just see her like at
conclusion.
his desk with her crown on and the big cape and everything.
Just an
Just, like,
entire
with a-
chapter
with
of
a pen.
Historia writing legislation.
Taxes.
Raise all the taxes.
Oh my god, I can't believe Old District wants $5,000 for a new gate. I mean, what do they think I am, made of money?
The chapter of Historia balancing the budget would be the best chapter ever.
The chapter reaches the climax and she gets a hand
right.
cramp from writing.
Obama,
That would be amazing.
Obama Simulator 2015.
Who is the next big bad?
Monkey
You think?
Trouble. That's what I think. I think because it's either that or it has to be somebody else from outside the walls. Because everything within the walls now is just all political. It's just hammering out the details. Because now that Historia's in charge, I'm assuming everything's going to go, not perfectly smoothly, but in the right direction without too many major hiccups. And now that our focus is shifting back to the basement, right on the edge of the walls there, we're going to have to go back to the antagonist being from outside the wall somewhere, because I can't think of who else it would be. Whether that's RBA, and the Shifter Village, or Emer's people, or Monkey Trouble, I can't say for certain. But if I had to place a bet, I'd wager it's going to be on the Trouble side of things.
That's definitely where our protagonists are going to be headed, is to the basement. And I'm sure there's going to be a couple hiccups with, like, Aaron not being able to get hard again. He'll be like, I have to train, And then the Rocky montage with, where he gets stronger and then he can use it. And then, I guess, RBA or somebody's going to oppose him. Maybe Monkey Trouble. And then that'll be the conflict.
Adding a Rocky montage.
It'll be funny when it's just like
That
Rocky and he
will be
loses.
The best. That's just it. That's the penultimate right there. We have to have like I don't know, not like the final countdown, but we need like Hearts of Fire, right, from Rocky 4.
Never
He
watched
is just
any
a
of
training
it.
montage.
Yeah, that's what we need.
More
So
training montage.
basically, that direction I think is always sort of how we've approached it, is to say, oh, it's going to be Monkey Trouble, or Reiner and Berthold are going to return, or like, I don't know, Annie's dad's going to come in, or...
Yeah, there's a reason I haven't said anything. It's because it's impossible to predict.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
All we're doing is just making more opportunities to
Throwing
look
darts
stupid
at the
later.
wall, kind of. No one's
Yep.
going to remember we said something stupid like this in this episode.
Fucking hope so.
I still feel like an idiot for insisting that for like every month that Kenny's going to come back and he's going to team up with them to go outside the walls or whatever.
Anymore.
Well, his heart was in the right place.
Shut up, Stiller. It's still wrong.
So funny. God, I'm surprised how many people on the subreddit were actually really salty about Kenny dying.
Well, we wanted to see
thought
more
you
of the badass cowboy man.
Like I said, he brought personality to it. People miss that.
Yeah,
People
but
miss
now
his
that he's
attitude.
gone, once Connie and Sasha and those guys come back, it'll be like he was never there. Like,
It's not the same. Connie,
Yeah.
but they both bend the knee to Levi. You know what I mean? He's in charge of them. Kenny doesn't. He's playing his own ball game. He's
give it
his
2
own man.
months and we'll totally forget he was ever there.
3 strikes, he's out.
I'm with Scotty on this one.
Yeah.
Connie's just gonna make it seem like Kenny was never there.
This is so true.
Cowboy
Same as
hat.
all.
6-shooter.
Doesn't Connie have like a little straw hat? Isn't that what he used in his camouflage?
Not like camouflage, but I think in one episode he had one.
I couldn't see him. He was camouflage.
Yeah, it was true. He was in the background. He couldn't see it.
Every time.
Press even noticed him.
Oh, yeah. But I think it's question time.
Oh, actually, before we do jump into that, there is one thing I noticed, or at least I'd like to gripe about this chapter, as if we haven't done that enough. But the whole Kenny squad, like not Annie and those characters, what was the fucking point of them? They got introduced the other chapter with the whole thing about like the speech about like believing in Kenny's plans and ideals, and then they all got killed in one fell swoop by the wrong boulders, and then we get this flashback about him, like basically the whole story about him winning them over and like explaining like. But like, what was the point?
The point was,
it kind of
is that since Nifa died, we have not had any solid contenders for kitchen characters, and now that that's not Annie team has died, we have a new squad ready to join the full roster of the kitchen character crew.
A lot of new cooks.
A lot of new cooks in the kitchen. Their roster just skyrocketed. We got a lot more kitchen characters now.
But like, I understand the point that Isayama was trying to build with their squad. It's like, oh, now we're gonna show, Kenny's like not taking the rules, seriously. He's going against them, and he's like, you know what? Oh yeah, I set up the squad, but it's BS. We're just gonna do our own motives, and we're gonna try to have our own world order. We're gonna go against the military police, and we're part of them. And then it's kind of like really anticlimactic because the chapter that just happened was like, oh, but they all just died, right? Oh, okay. It's like,
and then everyone died. So why do you...
Yeah, 10 minutes later, the boulders killed my entire squad. Like, oh.
Well, I guess thinking about it a little more, it does, I guess I will admit, it does kind of fit in with a theme, with some of the general themes that the series runs with, in the sense that this chapter illustrated what we kind of suspected earlier, with Not Any Speech, that these guys weren't bad people, his squad here, and they actually looked like they did have some pretty noble ideals. I mean, at least Kenny seemed to convince them that this was the right thing to do. And, they got all in the right mind and then got killed for their troubles, by all those falling boulders. So I guess it does serve to highlight the whole idea that it's, life isn't fair, and that even if you are the good guys, quote unquote, and you're fighting for what is a just ideal, it doesn't mean that you're going to come out unscathed or live at all. So I guess I suppose I'll concede the argument that, yeah, it maybe serves that purpose to kind of highlight something we've already been shown. But other than that, it was like 2-3 chapters they were in, and then they were cut. So it was very, very strange.
You play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
Wah, wah, wah.
So now.
But yeah, that Game of Thrones.
Right.
Fuck.
Now we're ready to move into the question segment, where you guys on the subreddit have submitted a bunch of questions for us to answer. And so, Scotty, if somebody wanted to send questions to us to answer during the podcast, where would they send them?
Well, Stiller, I'm glad you asked. They can send their questions to gmail.com or the new chapter mega thread.
They could just send them anywhere on Gmail. Just, here, Gmail, have a question. Let it go to the right person.
Find the CEO of gmail.com and directly send him your questions.
Didn't I?
Fucking idiot said this.
Yes, you did, still.
You gave me the wrong template,
I did give you the wrong
Stiller.
template.
How could you mislead me like that? I look like a
It'll
fool.
be fine.
It's the best move of all time.
If someone wanted to send a question for us to answer on the podcast, where would they send that question?
Oh, they could send it to our Gmail account at
snkpodcast@gmail.com.
What address was that?
or the new chapter mega thread.
snkpodcast.com.
Did
Wait,
you
no,
forget
shit.
a D?
No, I forgot the @gmail part.
Goddamn,
That's
we are the worst at this. Just send your goddamn question to the SNK podcast email or go to the mega thread. That's it. We're done with this damn thing because it's not working.
Or it'll be on the
fuck
sidebar.
yourself,
I'm
San
gonna put it on the
Diego.
sidebar right now.
Okay.
First question. What are the chances of Levi dying in the next arc or going to the basement?
I think it's weird how they specify Levi for the basement as if like he's the main
going with him, isn't
person heading there. Yeah, but like to specify just like when is Levi going to the basement implies like it's solely him going. Well, I think it's more of an Aaron pushed effort and more of a 104th squad effort. But in terms of him dying, I don't think he's gonna die. I mean, I feel like they just built him up to have more character development. So the fact that they would do that and then immediately kill him seems counterproductive.
That's
So
the
I say
implication
that-
I got from the question, is that because we've given him development, now we can kill him.
I like
'cause
Kenny.
he hasn't done anything with the development
you.
though.
Well,
Like,
that'll be the thing. He'll die
so
doing
far-
something that fulfills what that development was leading to, and then he'll die.
I feel
He
like
can't
they'd have
die
to-
until we've sorted out the Mikasa
That's
situation, the Ackerman question on their
That's
aspect
true.
of it. So we still have
That's
more
really
time
Time
for
on the
that.
clock for you, Levi.
But again, I mean, he is the squad leader, so where he goes, it's assumed that everybody else goes for all intents and purposes. Or at least if the squad's going somewhere, it's under his direction. So I guess I can understand that perspective with the question in mind.
True. I feel like they are going to the basement. That's the only next logical
Well,
progression.
that's their goal. The question is, are they going to make it there before being sidetracked by something else?
From making it there?
Yeah, I feel like they're gonna have some obstacle. They're not gonna encounter just, oh no, it's actually a clear path. Hey, let's just stroll right
Well,
into
they're
the
not
basement.
going to waste
Like,
their time
that-
showing us like them killing random titans when it's not really consequential to the story.
I mean in terms of actual threats, like RGB or RAB or whatever.
RGB?
I
The
know.
colors are attacking us!
I know. Oh, whatever.
Levi, stop taking LSD.
Yeah, boy, that'd be a fucking trip.
That's
Yes,
well,
literally.
I
that's
see what you
just
did
what we
there.
need.
Wink, wink.
Next question: do you think Kenny had any descendants throughout his life?
Here lies
That
Kenny.
question-
He ran
That's an interesting
fast
question.
and died a
Next
virgin.
Ryan, did you have a thought on that?
Well, I'm just thinking of Kenny in general. I mean, does he seem like the kind of person who would have... He seems like the kind of person who would have gotten around, you know what I mean? It seems like there was no woman tying
Yeah.
him down. So he was kind of doing his own thing. But at the same time, I mean, you know,
What?
with Levi and all that, it doesn't seem likely that he would be the kind of
Well,
father
I mean,
bastard.
you look at it. Levi is sort of fulfilling that role for Kenny as the son I never had, or the illegitimate son, or the bastard son. Or
Actually,
any of those variants,
That's a good point,
right?
yeah.
Kenny gave us the answer to this question himself. I wasn't a good father. Therefore, yeah, I doubt he'd try
So-
again.
Levi
Ah, yeah,
fulfilling
I
those
see.
different variants seems to imply that him having another son
Didn't
out there
have one.
somewhere. What would the point of this extra son and being introduced to the story sort of help along? You know what I mean? What would be the purpose of that?
I could only see it being convoluted.
Yeah.
Because it would just
Well,
be
it'd be
adding another
redundant.
acronym to the question.
Too.
At this point, yeah, it doesn't...
Okay, so next question, I guess. Who should Levi inject and have eat Annie to become a shifter?
Anybody. She needs to get
Nobody
eaten.
at all.
And
Just-
this is all under the assumption that you can even eat her.
Because you can't.
I mean,
that crystal
is that
is
crystal
totally
even edible?
unbreakable. You can't break that.
It's like it's like a
You can't
Tootsie Roll
break that
pop.
crystal. You can't do it.
Plot armor
And
is
her
super
crystal
thick.
is
You
so
cannot break it.
thick and so sharp. If like they tried to eat her, like the crystal would just cut through them and come out the backside.
Plot armor, not crystal.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Stiller. You're forgetting
Plot
something.
armor.
Or you're forgetting something.
No, I think we're addressing the question, aren't we?
Forgetting something. No. Titans don't have butts.
Well, no, I mean she would just make a new asshole for herself to fall out of. You know what I mean?
Okay.
The
What are we
crystal is
talking
so
about right now?
sharp and so unbreakable, like you cannot fuck with it at all. It is fuck proof.
There is now a permanent link to the podcast questions on the sidebar of the subreddit.
Can't mess with it. It's totally.
Okay.
It's
I think for the purpose
But
of this question, you must
Hypothetically, if the crystal was cracked open and somebody was to eat her,
Not her.
who would it be?
I'm not.
I
I'm
would
not
say-
okay with anyone being the recipient of that. So I'm just gonna stick with nobody.
I'm trying to go with the funniest answer because I can't.
Counteract.
I mean,
my,
I do want to
like,
answer this
no,
question.
like cop out, unfun, stiller answer.
Utter
Yeah,
refusal
yeah.
to play along.
I mean, for practical purposes, I don't think anyone will eat her because she serves a purpose all of her own. Like, there's no real reason why UCM won't be like, I think a new person needs to inherit her powers, because we still have unanswered questions for her, obviously. But if for the sake of this question, someone was going to eat her, who would I want to see out of all of them, or who would I think would be most practical to do so? I guess someone who's powerful but not a shifter yet.
Erwin.
So, oh my god. Erwin, they could regenerate his arm, and then he'd be a badass. He already is, but he'd be
Why
even more
did I say
badass. Oh my god. He'd be unstoppable.
Well, I think it would be interesting. And with this being said, I'd obviously prefer nobody to eat her. But I think the most entertaining option would probably be Hanji.
No. Oh my god.
I mean,
that
if she was a shifter, that opens up a whole nother
Man,
set of
I would be
opportunities
so
here.
salty. I'm already salty. I'm like pre.
What did I miss?
She already loves
preemptive
Titans.
assault right now because that
Hanji?
would be the worst.
Yeah.
Aw, poor
She's
baby.
like doing experiments on herself and stuff and just being, just
I would
potty.
be so salty, man. I would hate that so much. Oh my god.
I would love that just to see Salty Stellar. That would be my favorite podcast.
I couldn't handle it, man. That'd be the worst.
It would be
Real
pretty
quick.
upsetting if it happened.
Stiller?
So, Scotty, your answer was Erwin?
No, that was your answer. You said
My
that,
answer was
but,
Erwin. Thank you very much.
definitely, you brought up Erwin, though.
As a
That's what you
potential.
said.
As a
Good
potential.
point. Stiller, or not Stiller, Erwin might do it just to regenerate his arm.
I guess. No, Levi would be too OP. So now-
Connie?
well, Connie's already a shifter. He's monkey trouble. Remember?
Oh, that's true. That's a good
But
point.
there's, it's redundant, but so yeah, no. I guess Erwin, that's a fine answer.
What happens if a shifter eats another shifter?
It's called cannibalism.
Exactly what happened with Grisha and Frida.
Oh, right, yeah, duh.
Why is this a question?
Okay, that never mind. That was a pretty stupid thing
It's
to ask. Yeah.
cannibalism, and one of them goes to jail.
Yeah, the proper.
You don't go to jail if there are no witnesses.
And the other one is dead. I mean,
This is true.
okay, yeah, I retract that question.
Okay. Next question.
Some people are pointing out similarities between Armin and Urian. While I would love to get a backstory on Armin's parents and or family, I really don't see it. Sure, they're both blonde and have blue or light color eyes, so does like 40% of the population. Still, though, I gotta ask, what's your guys' opinions on this? I think they're not related. I think that the question is correct, the submitter.
Agreed.
I would agree with that
I
as well.
don't see any reason why that would be a connection to make.
Well, people are always looking for connections, you know what I mean? Like, even the loosest things, if they look, I mean, how many characters have we seen where they just look similar and people are,
Like the
making
time
connections
we
between
thought,
them?
or they thought Armin's parents were the people who were getting into the blimp, right?
I still think
Or
that's...
the hot air balloon, or whatever it was. Not a blimp. Blimp's too big.
Well, it kind of makes sense in the context, but I mean, again, it's anime versus manga. With what was the manga where his parents died in the expedition?
In the
Neither.
The Colin, that's right. Well, that's what I meant. I mean, his granddad died in one and his parents died in the other. Like,
Wait, really? I thought they always had Grandpa die.
like I just remember it was different in one than it was in the other.
Okay.
Now that Midget Storia is queen, what do you think her first order will be? And there's a stipulation that you cannot answer with find Ymir or kill Armin or kill
Damn it.
Armin so she is the number one blonde. Those are some pretty tough stipulations.
Well, okay, realistically, if you just had this like revolution, you're the new monarch.
Balance the budget.
And this war torn like ravaged society that has like 2 walls left now.
Yeah, it should be 2.
So the first point of order should be making sure that everybody is still not starving to death. I guess actually the biggest question here is going to be what the role of the military now is, because that's something she's got to sort out, because they have been the de facto rulers up until this point, and the whole idea was that they were going to rule by proxy through her, but now it's a question of how far does their power extend? Are they basically going to be running the country? Is she just going to be a figurehead, or is she going to be actually doing any kind of ruling herself?
I think her first order is actually just going to be to move the plot forward. Basically, her first order is.
I order you to go find the base.
Pretty much. I think not actually give the order for that, but like to allocate the resources and to remove the restrictions and sort of push along past the red tape and sort of get the Survey Corps back on their feet and like get out there.
That could actually be much more realistic than we think, because what she could do, because we already have this problem of land and there's not enough food, is that we need to get the third wall back so that we can get those crops back, that land back, so that more people can come in. Yeah,
that's a good point, yeah.
So because of that, it's very realistic that she'll order that, and that in turn will progress the plot of the basement, because it's...
Yeah, her first point of order may be fix the third wall so we can get society back on track. I don't know why you
phrased that like I had no idea what I was talking about.
You never have any idea what you're talking about.
That was totally my intention from the beginning.
What was?
That it would move the plot forward and we'd be able to progress by taking the wall back and getting the farms going and all that.
I thought you were taking that into just a more jokish, just her literally saying move the plot forward.
It can serve both purposes.
That way. I was just highlighting second purpose a little more.
Maybe her first point of order will be something mundane, like restructuring the tax system.
You say mundane,
like
but I'm telling you that would be the best chapter.
It would be pretty exciting.
It's like, oh my god, how am I going to fix this? You know, they need money for a new school. How do I get the money for this?
A new soccer field. We gotta make this happen.
Exactly. The Shingeki wall riders have to exist, damn it. Next question is, do you think SNK will have a true evil villain without him or her being a great character? Or them, or they?
No.
No, because
in my opinion.
that character or that villain would be boring, honestly. Because I don't understand what the morally like pure or the morally evil side of the story would be. Because even if you're a character who's like, I want to kill all the humans to make like this master race or whatever, it's like you want to do it because you want to. Yeah, essentially. Because no, but even that isn't like pure evil, because you're doing it because you want to make everybody like
practical,
equal,
basically.
And you want it to be practical, and you want it to work. Because
morality is subjective.
I forget who said it, but like every villain thinks they're the hero. You know, every villain thinks that they're doing whatever they're doing for the good of the people, for the good of whatever their cause is.
And they'd be a shitty villain if they weren't.
Yeah, exactly. So like anyone who's just not a shade of gray villain, I wouldn't be interested in seeing that villain.
Unless they're like, well, no. I mean, I could get some laughs out of like a super over the top, cheesy, like hammy villain guy.
Like Kenny right when we first met him?
Well, no, because Kenny wasn't that good at being ham. But if we had a super good, like, over the top dude, it would be funny, but it would absolutely destroy everything that the show built.
Oh, yeah. Like, the hallmark of the series is the fact
that...
The
show would be so
again,
wrecked.
it's the subjectivity of the fact that, you can understand or empathize with people's perspectives regardless of what side of the conflict they're on.
Undermined. But it would be funny.
Yeah.
I would mind it with the spice.
So, I mean, you gotta take your risks, you know? Know when to hold them, know when to fold them, etc., etc.
Wise words by Stiller.
Etc., etc.
Just that end quote, etc., etc. Stiller.
That is my end quote, definitely. Okay, next question. Instead of taking the crown, Historia decides to ditch humanity and leave the walls. Which character would you welcome as your new backup overlord?
Wait, I have to read that.
The question aside, I would still be pissed if she did that. Not to bring that up again, but...
I don't know about hate that direction, but regardless. Backup overlord. I don't know. That's a tough one.
Erwin would be pretty interesting.
Yeah. I would say
Erwin would be like the most realistic, most boring response.
He seems the only one that, I mean, this is pretty funny considering we're talking about him replacing Historia, which is the exact opposite, but I was going to say he has the most experience, and I think is the most qualified for that position.
He's the best fit, realistically. It fits with the story that he would have a moment where he sort of has to make his gut check again and make sure that he's still, composed and up to the task like he usually is. But he'd be qualified for it. I think that realistically works. Otherwise, we'd have to go to Nile. I like Nile as a backup overlord potential.
Yeah, I don't know enough about him to make that call. You know what I mean? Because we've had very limited interactions with him.
Yeah.
I don't know who else you would pick, because you can't go exactly, because that would be like hell on earth nightmare scenario.
It seems that the guy's lost that a little bit.
Same for Hanji. Can't do it with Hanji either.
Could you imagine Armin?
Man, that would be a hell of a task.
I could see Armin or Jean. I think Jean would be pretty good.
I don't know. Those two would be super premature. Just put them on the throne like that.
More premature than Historia?
Yeah, I think so, actually.
Oh my! See this? Okay, this disclaimer ahead. This is a pretty unpopular opinion, and I don't think she's a very good ruler. And I don't think
well, that's good character building if she's not.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, goodness gracious, because based on what I've seen from her so far up to this point, I think that she has all the qualities of a shit leader. Now, I know that's the opinion goes the other way, and people feel very strongly about that, but that's just my opinion, and I'm sure that she'll grow into the role and end up in the story being a good leader, but at the moment it seems like there's other people I would rather have in charge.
The way that I would describe her character development over the series is to say not that she's been put in a position where she's ready to lead, but that she's put in a position where she's ready to carry on with her life. Not that she's in a position where she's ready to take on such a huge responsibility, but that now she's able to finally be herself to live her own sort of life and make her own sort of decisions. Not that she's been.
Well, I mean, in this, it kind of goes into like Maslow's hierarchy or something. It's like, how can you be worried about taking care of an entire society of people if you can't even figure out yourself? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but with that in mind, I mean, I understand that it's certainly reasonable that there are occasions where people will rise to the occasion. You won't know if somebody's competent enough until you put them in that position, and they'll rise to the challenge.
A perfect transition to where we are right now. Now that she's finally ready to sort of go about her path in life, now we have this perfect.
Well, that has to be the only way I can justify it, because
this is the perfect opportunity for her to make that leap. To make that rise.
Yeah, it seems like you'd want to have somebody who had figured that out before you put them in charge, instead of having them figure it out while they're now coronated. Yes. But again,
that's the ideal situation. But...
Yes.
Because Erwin knows what he's doing. Erwin, obviously, he was never going to be the king because he doesn't have the royal blood. But the difference is that
you can't put him in an office. He's got to get out and stretch his legs. He's not one of those.
Yeah. Well, I guess, and the point is moot since they're going to be ruling through her anyway. So it's not like she has like. Going to be making all these executive decisions all the time. So I guess I'm putting a little too much stock in it, and maybe I'm not giving her enough credit, which is fair. But again, like I said, based on what I've seen in her development up to this point, I would be uncomfortable with her in charge if I was there.
Fair point, though. I do like that. Next question is, what would be the worst ending this series could possibly have?
I think we already talked about the worst ending, which would be one that's very neatly tied up, whether it's good or bad. I feel like I would even rather have a complete tragedy than just an absolute everyone gets their story resolved.
The preferred ending.
Yeah, well, not like total okay, maybe like I'm thinking like the complete opposite of everyone gets their story, as if like everyone just dies from the walls just collapsing, and then they try to stop the onslaught of just aberrant titans that come in, and then they can't stop them, and they just all get slaughtered. And it's just like an impromptu, the story ends here, they tried and they failed. Like, that would be horrible. In the same sense of, like, if everybody, here's this cure we found in the basement, it just solves our problem. Here, let's, inject certain titans with this, we can just go around the world as humanitarians and solve all the titan needs. And then boom, the story's over, goodbye. Like, that would be the worst ending of all time. If they
I agree that would be a bad ending, but I'd have to say a worse ending would be no ending at all, like the Dead Man Wonderland anime.
I think I've got a worse ending than both of those. I'd say, so picture this. We get to the end of the series, we get to whatever final conclusion we reach, the story wraps up, and then Eren wakes up and you realize the whole thing was a dream.
Yeah, you got me. That's the best. That's the worst ending.
And not even that. It wasn't just a dream, but he's some kid living in like Bangladesh or something, and like an impoverished like slum. And this is like his like dream, putting him in some other like fantastical reality to as a coping mechanism to escape with a shitty life.
He wakes up from the coma.
Attack on Titan is Kenshiro's nightmare.
So yeah, that would be a pretty upsetting ending. So.
Oh man, like they zoom out and then you see that the show is broadcast off of the TV, and it's like someone in our world just like, well, that was a good show.
This is like the fucking Truman Show.
So meta, like a show within a show.
There's no fourth wall. There's just the Truman Show. It's just there's the edge of the dome. They all get out, and it turns out it's just a TV show.
We really have to break out the meter here and say, like, where's the scale on how bad these endings are? You know what I mean? Which one's the 10?
Oh, I think all these are 10.
They're all pretty bad.
Yeah, but which ones are going over the 10? Which ones are like out of the realm of just horribleness?
Monkey Trouble.
Have none of you watched Dead Man Wonderland?
The Dead Man Wonderland anime ended the same way the Attack on Titan anime ended. The story was not concluded because there's more stuff in the manga. You know what I mean? Like, that's not...
Well, at least there was somewhat of a conclusion to season 1. Dead Man Wonderland is just done.
It's not
You're out.
fair comparison, though, because the manga is still ongoing with the story. You know what I mean? Like, if it had just ended flat there, that would be the worst. So that's another potential worst ending, is if they just, for whatever reason, just stop.
Isayama has a heart attack.
Cut to black, just done.
Pretty much, just like Mikasa. There's a scene of Mikasa where she says Eren's name, and it's like, roll credits. Goodbye.
Or here's another worse one. Mikasa and Monkey Trouble fall in love, and they get together. See, that would be like the happy ending, and everybody survives. Everybody else is dead, but they're okay.
I think we're ready to move on to the next question.
You sure we can do this all day?
because you're totally right. We could totally do this all day if we wanted to. Do you think Historia will do anything drastic, since she has stated in a previous chapter that she hates humans?
Nah,
Well, there's
just
been a
heat
lot of
the
debate
moment.
about how much of that was just heat of the moment, and how much of that is.
I would love to get more explanation from her about that quote.
Well,
That
it's
would
tough
help a lot.
because we know that again, and we talked about this before, but remember she admitted last chapter, or the chapter before, that when she was in the cave with Eren and Rod, that she believed Rod, that she was serious, she was going to eat Eren. And she was totally convinced by him. And obviously the pendulum swung back, and now she's viewing it the other way, the more correct way, where it sounds like she's on the right side, and she's actually on our side now, which is good. But it makes you wonder if she was, if she was convinced and like really wholeheartedly believed them, and then switched back the sides. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell what she really believes, even though she's become a lot more confident in herself and seems to be more secure with what she does believe. It's hard to know as the reader what exactly that is until we see more evidence of her putting in a situation where she has to demonstrate that.
Fair point.
So I don't know is the
It's always the answer. Every question that we could possibly address is going to end, probably, in I don't know.
Fuck it, I don't know.
Probably, maybe. I feel like I'm having deja vu to, like, the first couple of podcasts we ever did, because that's basically the same thing we said then, too. Next question is, how do you guys feel about Levi killing his mom pimp?
Like, I think they're trying to ask, how would you feel if Levi were to hunt down the guy that pimped out his mom and
He
kill
did.
him?
Well,
That was the guy who was
the
beaten up with the
question.
knife
How
in the
do we
chapter.
feel about
Was he?
Yeah.
about? I guess the question is like, how do we feel about Levi being confirmed to be like a child warrior? You know what I mean?
I mean,
Well, it seems very much in character with what we know about him so far. It seems in line with his rough, like, do what you have to survive in that environment childhood. And then how that translates to his kind of ruthfulness in combat later on in
Fits
life
his
as well.
archetype, basically.
Yeah, the backstory is consistent with what we're seeing him now, so I think it. Well, I guess if the question is about whether it was right or wrong that we should have done, I say fair play to the guy. I mean, you might as well.
Not like
What do you got to
Levi knew
lose?
any better at that age. Like, can you really judge
yeah.
him at that point?
And that's what Kenny had taught him too. Kenny was his only real role model up to that point, other than his deceased mother, and he had been teaching him essentially how to fight with a knife. I mean, that's what the whole thing was about, right?
yeah.
Look at the flowers. Look at the flowers. The question is, I'm gonna not address this to me specifically because this was originally addressed to me. I'm gonna pitch this to all of you guys, if you care to answer, and that is, who do you ship Annie with?
A bullet.
That's one answer.
No, I would say, for me, it's very easy to answer this. I would go with Armin. for
You're
sure.
one of those people.
Yeah, I mean, the show set them up with more of a chance than anybody else in the story. So, I mean, you could go with the Eren Annie setup, but I really don't know about that. So, or the Bertold Annie.
Yeah, honestly, I either see Berthold or Armin.
What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah, I don't know. Personally, I'm not huge into shipping. Like, I do see the appeal in it, and it is kind of fun at times, but I'm not too well invested in it. I guess if I had to pick someone, it'd be either Bert or Eren, because I feel like, based on what we've seen with the interactions between the two up to this point, it seems like the most consistent, or at least it seems like the best fits. But again, that both those, at least the Eren ship is.
I'm just now
pretty far.
I'm just
from what
now
I've seen.
realizing we actually have 3 different suitors. We could actually make a dating game episode out of this.
Oh my god.
Fucking worst thing on earth.
Number 1.
Fuck you.
Bertold would just kill them all. He just turned into the big toy and just boom.
Or like
into the show.
pussy out.
Oh my god. Like Bert would be like contestant number 2, and he'd get asked like a super personal
Oh, he'd be sweating
question.
so much.
He
He'd be
would
drowning
be.
people in his sweat.
Yeah, but no.
Or no,
I can see him.
Contestant number 2, how do you like to spend your time at home?
Sweating.
With Annie.
Sweat into the microphone with short circuit.
Causing him to damage himself and then turn into a titan, and then the entire studio would just erupt.
And somehow the music would keep playing. That is a...
Yeah.
What are you still? You didn't answer the
getting to
question.
it. I'm in a roundabout way. I'm getting to it. My answer is Berthold. I do ship Annie and Berthold just because I think they are the best pair. strangely enough. I think they match the best. How do I explain that better? Their personalities work good together. Like, what? How do I explain that better?
I don't know. Explain the personalities.
You get all of like 3 words out of a conversation between the two.
And that's...
Yeah, that would be so awkward, though. I don't know. I guess that they, like, birds of the same feather flock together. Like, they definitely are the quiet, introvert type, although Annie likes to go on a killing spree every once in a while.
Appeal of the, like, childhood friend, girl next door approach more than the Aaron being the fiery guy who fought with her. Though.
We are learning so much about Stiller today.
Shut your mouth, alright?
Serial killer, he hates dogs.
When Stiller was young, he had a crush. Yeah, he had a childhood friend who had a crush on.
What was the other one we learned? Oh yeah, he has long hair.
Or had. He had a haircut.
Some of these are myths, and some of these are facts.
It was like 8 feet long. It was like Paul Bunyan.
Some of these are myths, and some of these are fact, and I'm going to leave that for you to decide. I don't like the fiery approach, like the heated relationship between Annie and Aaron. I don't think that... I just don't like that appeal. And Armin, like a little house on the prairie, you know? I don't like that.
I liked the mutual respect that Aaron and Annie had. The idea that she respected his ability to stand up for what he believed in without really caring what anybody else thought.
They match ideals, but I feel like...
Well, they kind of, in a way, they kind of complement each other. There's a bit of a foil going on between them. You know, kind of the secretive nature of her versus his really outgoing
personality. They respect each other's beliefs and their ideals, and they work well together on that plane, on that concept. But Isayama even addressed it himself in defining it as a respect relationship in terms of...
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know it'll never happen.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that just like because he said it that it's not going to happen. But I think that approach that he took in responding to it that way sort of indicated sort of how I feel about it now, too, because I kind of agree with him. I think Berthold and Annie are going to end up having more common sort of themes about them that if they ever actually do get the time to spend with each other, I think it'll work out the best with those two.
You know, that's actually funny. I noticed this. I found, it must be chapter 4. Bert says, I'm applying to the military police brigade, and Annie says, me too, but I don't want anyone thinking that we're together.
What a bit.
If you look at it, that's a common, like, relationship starter, that sort of thing happens between two people. You know what I mean? But anyway...
We're just friends, back up.
In the end, I don't think they'll get a happy ending. I think that if that's the case, one of the two of them will die before. Situation,
I'm going to say that that's the best fit. Because Berthold has gone on record as being, like, psychotically sort of obsessed with the idea of rescuing Annie and being mad at the humanity for torturing her and that sort of thing, where Armin and Aaron were just sort of like, yeah, that's kind of weird. Why did you do that? We're kind of mad.
Yeah, and we all know.
Well, they also felt betrayed as well. Remember? Well, I mean, I'm not taking away or tracking from your point, but
the idea that Annie didn't work with Berthold in trying to capture Aaron, I think, has an element to it too that we need to explore. That we're probably not going to, but I think there's a lot more going on between Annie and Berthold than there is with Annie and anyone else.
That's probably
that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't be compatible with anybody else, because like just in the same.
Give it a chance,
but in the same way. Stop. In the same way that you're like infatuated with like the girl next door or whatever scenario, I like the opposite attracts kind of situation. And I feel like the sense of Armin, who is like the intellectual type, not to say that Annie's dumb, but we've seen her use more of her brawn than her brain in a sense. So it's like I like the counterparts of like one's using simply intellect or mostly intellect, and one's using mostly brawn. And also,
no, you Annie described Annie as a brawn character. That is not
well.
Right
Okay, to be fair, he has a point. Her plan on capturing Aaron was pretty shitty.
She's the tactical one of the three of them.
Well, that's pretty bad. If she's the tactical one and their plan was that bad.
And Reiner.
Well, that doesn't speak wonders of her. That just makes Reiner and Bert look even stupider.
Yeah, their plan for capturing Aaron was, hey, Aaron, we're the guys who hate most in your entire existence. Well, come with us.
Zach's got a point there. That actually sort of makes that sort of an accurate statement.
The least stupid of the three. Don't get me wrong. I still am a huge fan of the character, but she definitely doesn't compete with Armin in terms of
bad plans. But overall, she does speak.
But her plans.
She was clever.
She knew Armin. She is very well spoken.
plans, though. The way she goes about going.
She doesn't speak, Stiller.
Sometimes, and when she does speak,
And you say she's had a few bad plans?
she's not.
She's only had 2 plans. And they both were fucked up.
She's had more than a couple of plans, and they all.
And how did she execute these plans, sir? How did she execute them? With force. That's all I'm trying to say.
Supposed to execute them. What other options does she have?
With guile and trickery.
She
Yes,
doesn't
when
have
Erwin
the kind
and
of resources that everyone else has to try and execute some of this stuff.
Well, all I'm trying to say is I think they're counterparts, and also how Annie, she's like outgoing with like she takes action, she goes out and she does it. Where
Outgoing? What are you talking about?
Outgoing and drawn.
Maybe
not
proactive would have been the better term.
I don't understand. Just let me talk. Okay, so interrupted. What are you talking about, Scott? All right, listen. So the fact that she's outgoing, like, as
Stop using that word.
What that? Oh, okay, I'm done.
Proactive is a better term to use.
It is. It really is.
I don't even know if that applies, but anyway, continue, Scotty.
No, I mean, I'll try. The fact that I'm losing my train of thought now because I'm getting interrupted, but the fact that she is proactive, I guess I'll use that word, and Armin is more like the quiet, laid-back type. He comes up with the ideas, but he's not the one to execute them. He just gives them off to his team, and they execute it. So I just think like there are juxtapositions with both of those characters, and I feel like they would mix well as a couple. But again, I'm with you, Ryan, on the fact that I don't like to ship people. I've never done that, like, in any real capacity. So just for the sake of this question, I would much rather see Annie with Armin than anybody else, just for that reason.
Yeah, I feel like a fucking nerd talking about this.
I don't hate the idea of Annie and Armin that much. I just don't think it's preferable. You know what I mean?
I guess.
Before we move on a slightly, what we were just talking about a second ago, though, I will, contrary to what I said just a minute ago, I will defend with Stiller Annie's intelligence a little bit and say she's at least pretty clever because she figured out that Armin had figured her out. You know what I mean? Before that even came up.
She
That's
had
at
an
least
entire
something.
case of her like covering her trail that went pretty well until Armin caught onto it. Like without Armin, she would have definitely derailed the Survey Corps train of getting information about the Titans.
Yeah, but then it goes to show Armin's intellect that he
no one's
caught on.
questioning Armin's intellect.
And no one's questioning Annie's intellect either. You just assumed.
You did!
I literally
Well, I literally did just a second ago.
No, I literally just said, before anything, not to question Annie's intelligence. I said, what's the word? I prefaced my statement literally
You
with
and Zach both outed
with that
her as the smartest among the dumb people.
Yeah, that's like saying the cleanest piece of shit in the compost pile.
You're not helping your case.
Yeah, easy there.
Scotty, go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm literally out of thoughts at this point. That was all I had to say.
We have beaten this into the ground. Geez.
Good question. All right. So, next question then. Was it interesting to see all of those vice and motive to survive?
I think what the question was saying is in terms of Kenny and his motivation to survive, like, was it interesting for us to see, like, did we find it interesting that he would go to such lengths to survive?
I thought that was a given.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying the question was good.
I'm just
trying to say
applying
that.
to it. I'm saying that I think it was a given, and that, sure, it's a nice trait. I think that works well for him. That's the archetype they wanted to build for him. So, it went pretty well.
Yeah.
Worked out pretty well for him. How do you feel about more advanced technology in Attack on Titan? I mean, I guess we could start with the anti-3DMG parallel shooters. You know?
By the way, just a really stupid design that they had the grapply rope things coming out of the same way they're pointing handguns. Well, I feel like if you've got the swords, like with the regular 3DMG, and it's all firing from your hips, why can't you do that with the guns?
That's very true.
Because it seemed like just like a really big design flaw.
Because of plot armor, and they needed some way to take them down.
Yeah, because otherwise I don't see how the swords were going to beat the guns.
And you couldn't turn the gun, like, to your side. It was, like, locked in place, if I remember correctly. Because there was someone behind them, and I remember a character was like, shit, I can't turn around because the gun's, like, my body's facing the one way. And it's like, why can't you just turn around? I think there was some device that their arm was, like, fixed to a certain position in front of them, and they had to, like, turn their entire body to shoot. I don't know. It was a really weird system, nonetheless.
So what about the hot air balloon?
Oh, well, we see it back now that the old monarchy is disposed. Well, I
If
mean,
there's-
all
I
those
was
people
about
who
to
are
say, if anyone's
dead,
still
but
around who still has the blueprints or knows how to build it.
I doubt it.
it's tough to gauge what level of technology they have. Obviously they have the printing press. Obviously they have gas-powered things. And machinery.
Which means we're like just a hop, skip, and a jump away from having jetpacks.
All we need, basically.
Oh yeah.
That's basically what the 3DMG is.
It's a bit, oh my god, it's strange because the components that go into the 3DMG, all these little, really finely made, precise components have to go into it. That's a tough one to kind of rationalize how they did that. I mean, I guess
the concept is basically just what if jetpacks weren't as effective? How do we make jetpacks fair against this creature? Was basically how the 3MG was created. By Isayama, I mean.
Yeah, well, well, I mean, it's tough. You got to give Isayama a break because it's really, really difficult. I'd say nigh impossible almost
hook like
to write a story like this without, to write a story with this without letting any kind of anachronism sneak in, because he's writing this obviously with some point in either an alternate timeline that diverged from the past at some point, or in the past, or in the future where technology is. Regardless, the point is that it's really difficult as an author. The more complex you make your world, the more you big your world and flesh it out, the more opportunities you have to make errors, things that don't fit into place, things that wouldn't exist with this and X, Y, and Z. And so when things inevitably do slip up and things don't make sense, which I think they do, and they will again, you have to give them a bit of leeway because otherwise, nothing would ever make sense in fiction.
Yep.
Talking of modern, while we're here, we're talking of advanced, like modern technology, and this is just purely hypothetical and will never happen, but how cool would it be if some like modern military rolled up? Could just like come in and just
oh my god.
Yeah.
They were living in
And that's how the live-action movie ties into the manga.
It'd be pretty extreme though. An A-10 just fucking like dives down and just
like you just see like an attack helicopter flies over the cities. Like what? What is that?
Exactly.
Oh,
and then the guys in charge of the military operation just take over. They're like, all right,
is that
kids, we're in
some
charge
form
now.
of new abnormal?
Like metal. Why is it metal?
What's that fancy abnormal? It could shoot things out of its mouth.
Oh, look, there's a human trapped inside. We better rescue them.
God, if that led to some like conflict between the two, that would be so hilarious.
Just because the walls would be completely fucked.
Oh yeah.
That's the alternative question I think here is what crossover does not like completely break the world as far as opening goes.
Pretty much anything before electricity will be all right.
Yeah.
A boxing manga would be good.
I don't think so.
Well, because it wouldn't break the story. But it would be pretty
it was so
worthless.
so yeah, I mean, super worthless.
So I think the next question they asked actually ties in pretty well with what we just talked about, which is, do you think it's still likely that the Shifter Village is technologically advanced?
Nah.
Oh, I see. The idea that we're in the future and that everybody else took a step backwards while they didn't? Or the idea that, oh, I see, because they haven't been repressed. They haven't had
that one.
Assuming they haven't had the same technological repression. Yeah.
That concept.
Interesting.
I doubt it, because otherwise RBA probably would have brought some of that tech with them.
If
And also,
it
wanted to
was
blend in.
possible to sneak in some of that technology without standing out for having like a sonar or some shit.
Yeah, because they were supposed to be covert.
So it would be hard for them to actually use this advanced technology without getting caught.
Are we going to assume, though, that that Monkey Trouble is in the same group as the Village? Because if so, we've already seen that when Mike and Monkey Trouble came up against each other,
Had no idea.
Monkey Trouble was what?
I'm of the opinion that he's of a different group than RBA outside the walls. I think he's the same
I
group
was
as
getting ready
Ymir.
to say the same thing, pretty much.
But I don't think they have electricity outside the walls, because that would just be
Ymir
world
knows who
breaking.
that is, right? Ymir knows who the Monkey Trouble guy is.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if Reiner also know this,
Yeah.
and we've gotten
But
the
it seems
impression
like
they were
Reiner-
separate because they were having this conversation to sort of share information. You know what I mean?
It seems like RBA knew about Ymir and Annie. So it's like, Ymir, like when they confront each other, it wasn't like, wait, you're a shifter too? It was like, they all knew they were
had met
shifters.
Ymir before.
So in that sense,
I don't think Ymir knew that they were shifters, and I don't think that they knew Ymir was a shifter.
Reiner didn't figure it out until Utgard.
Yeah, they didn't.
True.
They certainly didn't know that Ymir was the Dancing Titan, because they had that whole panic attack. It's the guy that killed.
Marcel, Barrack.
Marcel,
you're right.
Barrack, whatever the fuck his name is now.
Yeah.
Never mind. But then that brings up the point, if the other towns or whatever of Titans, civilizations are separated, but they're not held back like the walls are, like technology-wise, and like that they can roam free and whatever, then how could they not run into each other before? Like, I don't know, it's really weird how that works.
Titan.
Well, I think that's what I think that's the older conflict that's going on out there. The historical conflict between RBA's people and Ymir's people. And I'm just speculating at this point because there's really no evidence.
RBA's people tried to break into the walls to get something so that they could finally defeat Ymir once and for all.
There's too much unknowns about it yet. But as far as the technology goes, there's no reason for us to assume that they have any limits on technological advancement. The only thing is that we just don't know anything about it. For all we know, they could just be, an agricultural collective of farmers. In which case, there'd be no technological advancement other than like making better plows for their crops because they wouldn't need it. But if they're like an advanced like civil, if they like have a full city, then maybe they have things like, I don't know, hot air balloons or whatever.
The idea is just to not make any assumptions. Don't rule anything out.
Yeah, we just don't know enough about it yet.
But I would assume even if they were like agriculturally based or whatever, that the fact that they sent 3 soldiers, kids, but still soldiers, warriors, to take down the walls implies that they were ready for a war to some degree, potentially. So I would assume that they would have developed, technologically speaking, for weaponry and armor or whatever in some capacity.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I almost wonder if we're not looking at the technology angle the wrong way, because what we looked at with the first king and all this transfer of power and that sort of thing sort of almost to me makes me wonder if the village's technology that we're referring to isn't actually like robotics and like pre-industrial steam powered type of stuff. Instead of it's like bioorganic sort of like gene manipulation type stuff.
Yeah, well, because we've seen that the Rices can do that, essentially, so... Or they have the knowledge to do that.
Well, and that opens up a whole different door, because then we start talking about
I don't want to make the assumption that they don't have, like, hard-built, like, metal sorts of technologies, and they're solely bioorganic, technologically advanced, materials.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, well, and again, like I was saying with Grisha, I mean... He had to get his Titan power from somewhere. We don't know where he got it. We don't know if he's been outside the walls or if that's where he, again, we still have to wait for Aaron to kind of spill out the memories for us, because so many mysteries locked up in that aspect of the story still.
So many mysteries. Okay. The last part of this question talks about, sort of assuming we had gotten to an answer that talked about the use of future technology. And the question is, do you think that the pre-industrial sort of environment that we're in, of the walled world of humanity, could actually handle or sustain a new environment using newer technologies that they're not familiar with? And I don't think that's I don't think this circumstance really adds anything to that conversation, because I think any scenario you paint where a pre-industrial civilization acquires new technology mysteriously and tries to handle the change is going to go a whole lot differently. You know what I mean? Like any scenario you paint where people using old technology magically acquire newer technology are going to be able to adapt super effectively.
Yeah, it has to be a natural progression in order for it to work effectively.
Well, an interesting parallel would be when look at like Native Americans versus when people came over with guns, germs, and steel, et cetera, from the old world. That's an example we can look at where there was older technology immediately replaced by, or at least introduced with brand new technology, which was a whole different level of advancement, and how that affected it, which was it's interesting to look at. You maybe draw some parallels between it,
but it's not necessarily. I mean, it is applicable to some extent, but in this situation, I think the question is trying to frame it as like technology being dropped to them without a population that already knows how to use them. Because in the example you gave, like, the Europeans that came over, they knew how to use, the guns and all of that, the steel and whatnot. Whereas, if you were just to hand the walls over, like, all this technology, like, just airdrop it and to be like, a look, like, and then they just evolved from there, I feel like it would be a much different story.
Very much so would be. Fair point. Next question, I guess. So, the first part of this next question is, did Not Annie's I don't care apathetic attitude kind of annoy you, or do you think it was completely reasonable?
I'd say we don't know enough about the character to really... Yeah.
It's a personality trait. It's one that we've seen before, so I can understand how there might be some annoyance with the repetition there. But it's a fairly standard personality trait. I think it's fun.
Well, it's what we talked about earlier. How, and kind of like Zach touched on, there was so short a time that she was even in the story. You know, it felt like we got an introduction, she had a couple lines, and then that was it. We got her a few flashbacks, but other than that, it was very interesting, just a very odd character in general, just how she was introduced and then how quickly that whole thing was killed off. It seemed like there was going to be a lot more importance placed on it when they were first introduced. I thought it was going to be, you know, Kenny and his company having an impact down the road, but no, it was just quickly nipped in the bud there and cut out. So I don't think, like Zach said, I don't think we got enough time. You know, we don't know anymore because she's dead, but we didn't get enough time to really address that.
You know, now she and the rest of her team are going to join the kitchen characters, and Mina, who's already in the kitchen, will get a Not Annie person to be her friend, and that relationship will exist again.
That's a big kitchen.
And,
that's a big kitchen.
All will be right with the universe. Did it seem inconsistent to you how fast Not Annie and the equally pessimistic soldiers seemed to lose their apathy when Kanye told them about this dream, or would you have been just swayed just as easily by his abundant charm? I don't know if the question actually submitted it as Kanye, or if one of you changed it to Kanye. Did you?
I changed it. I did. It got chuckle. I'm happy.
Accomplished. You did good work. That's a good callback. Yeah, what do we think? Inconsistent is the question here.
Well, I'm going to stick with what I said before. I think it was just all rushed. It was too fast. We got, 1, 2, maybe 2.5 chapters of turnaround. So they were introduced, and then like the next panel, Kenny won them over. So it wasn't about them. It was about Kenny. They were just kind of a vehicle for showing how Kenny was different from how he used to be, I think.
So any inconsistency there is sort of justified by the lack of investment.
Yeah,
from the right.
Yeah, and again, because it's a turnaround, it kind of showed that again they weren't the focus of that. They weren't important as much as it was. Yeah, like I said, they were just a vehicle for illustrating how Kenny had changed and what his ideals were now. Because otherwise, it was like, you got one panel of them before they'd supported Kenny, so there was really, what was even the point of it other than just to illustrate that he had changed their opinion at some point in the past.
So next question. I don't know if I feel like we've answered this question before, but I'm not sure if we have. And that is, you're trapped on a desert island with 2 characters, who and why? And why is the first person you thought of Connie?
Are we going to assume that these people have their powers, or...
If you pick a character who has powers...
Okay, well then that exclusively leaves shifters, because you'd be dumb to not have a shifter. So unfortunately, I did think of Connie first, but I can't pick him for practical reasons.
I don't know, how useful is a shifter really going to be on a small desert?
Well, catching food, killing prey, because they're quick, they're large, they can just get food for days for you, they can signal for help, they can, any object in the distance will be able to see a large titan over anything else. So I don't want to
go into the age argument, but assuming that the shifters are actually as old as they appear and as old as they're listed as, I think the best approach would be to take one shifter and one of the high-ranking military members for experience and power, along with yourself.
That's true.
Yeah, you need somebody with proper survival skills.
Which would mean you would take, like, Annie and Erwin.
Erwin would know what's up.
The only problem you have with Erwin is that he has one arm.
Yeah, but he wouldn't be the one gathering food. Yeah, but you only need one shifter to supply the amount of food you need for 3 people anyway.
I mean, it's not like everyone's completely helpless.
Do dead characters count?
Do dead characters count?
Because I was saying Mike would be pretty damn good.
Yeah, that's true. But there's no reason. Yeah, but there's no reason you'd pick Mike over Levi, because he's basically the same exact thing as Levi, except he's happier and he's a little less powerful than Levi.
Well, there you go. If I'm stuck on an island with these fuckers, I'd rather have
I'm
You're right.
more worried about Levi's sanity than I am Mike's.
I feel like Levi already has very little, not sanity, but he has little fucks to give. So it's like if he's on desert island, he's not gonna like care that much about it. He'll just like
enough time on the island.
He's like,
He'd be busy freaking out because the island would be dirty.
Enough time on the island, though, I think could probably ruin anyone's sort of mindset, you know?
I think Levi would love to be alone, or like that solitude would fit him nicely.
I don't know about that, because he likes his teams and he likes his squads.
I mean, does he though?
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't treat them like he loves them or likes them at all.
Like that, but they've built his character to say that he internally is actually bonding with these characters through their interactions, even if externally he's not showing that.
Well, he's doing it to keep them alive. He knows that, by kind of having that facade of detachment.
Even if he's not involved in the interaction, like if Petra is talking to Gunther or whatever, he's still there, he's still a part of the moment. Not that I'm really defending his internalization of some of these moments, but that seems...
But I think the point you're making can be applicable to every character. Like, anybody on the island will eventually lose their sanity. So it's not like...
The shifters have been out in the wild, though. They're in their own village, they've sort of been fending for themselves. I think they would be okay.
Levi's been fending for himself his entire life, even as a child.
Since I spent the past 5 minutes just completely zoned out, and now I'm back in, I'm going to have to go with my answer, Hanji and Erwin, because they're so smart they'd be able to MacGyver the way out of it pretty quickly.
Can Titans float?
We're not sure.
Like, could you build like a boat out of one of them?
I think this has been a question in the past, and we have no way of knowing.
Like, what if you just got Bert and just like stood on his back as he like floated through the ocean?
Then you'd burn to death.
Oh, that's right. He would be a bit warm, but the ocean will cool him off.
A bit warm.
Bit on the toasty side.
Boom. I thought about this. I know. I got the answer. What you gotta do is you bring Annie with you. She popsicles everybody, and then you float into some impenetrable ice.
It'd be like Finding Nemo. We're in their little bags.
Popsicle other people.
How do you did you talk to her? How many conversations have you had with Annie?
In his head, infinite.
You're giving her traits that we don't know her to have.
It doesn't matter. We know that she can harden, so then why couldn't she just hug everybody in like a group hug and then just harden the entire crystal around her?
Reiner and no one else, because Reiner can fly because we haven't seen it.
we know that Annie... No, it's not. It's not even close. You know it.
To be fair, Stiller.
You're a patently false.
Of her powers.
Stiller, to be fair, we do know that she started to fuse and harden with Eren.
She didn't turn Eren into one.
Boom.
So we can extrapolate from that and say that she could encase him and then de-harden herself.
Not turn him into a crystal, but he wasn't able to draw the power from her through that interaction. There is no connection there. There is no connection.
What power? Why would he be able to draw the power from her?
That doesn't make any sense to say that because he couldn't draw any power. It makes so much sense. I don't understand how this is such a logical detachment for you.
Yeah, when Eren and Annie were fighting in Stohess, at the very end they started melding together as she crystallized.
What's the basis for this beyond speculation?
There's no speculation. She has the ability to harden and make a crystal around her body.
And that's the end of the point, period.
Yes, so you get people
around
your body and you
close enough to her.
Right now, you are drawing on speculation. You have no basis for carrying this out.
I think it's a logical
Stiller, is that if Annie were to hug someone and form a crystal around herself, that person would just be magically excluded from the crystal?
We can't make that conclusion.
But it's a logical
conclusion.
Yeah, it's logic, Stiller.
Here's why.
A logical conclusion does not make it speculation.
Okay, that's fair. But think of it this way: we know that the hardening power she has, like the crystal, is the same substance to the wall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that substance is the same stuff that Eren was hardening in the cave, right?
Yeah.
We assume.
Eren hardened himself, and by extension was able to support the rest of the cavern. We know that the cavern was made by
the problem with this is that
if Annie can harden her fists...
No, but that just happened. What he just said, what Ryan just said, is a fact. It was in the chapter. We saw this. He did
what
this.
You're saying...
I'll concede that the inception is that their powers are the same, which we don't actually have any definite proof of yet, but... And you're right. It is speculation, but I think it's a logical speculation.
It could be a solid argument, but it is total speculation.
Okay, but it's speculation grounded in very heavy implication.
If you're
and then the wall Titans as well.
Sure.
Yes, I'm very okay with it. That's why I said it.
Well, if you can make crystal like harden stuff around you, like the wall titans, or what Annie did to herself, what's to say what that limit extends to? Like, how far out can you make that crystal?
Yeah, but we haven't actually seen Aaron.
Oh, shut up!
And you somehow equated that. Wait, you somehow equated that to Reiner flying, and I have to go back and say how ridiculous that point was. It is not even remotely close.
Straw man bullshit.
Those straw man bullshit I've ever seen in my entire life.
Reiner's full arsenal. He could have the potential to grow wings, but we don't know that.
There are different levels of speculation, and for you to have a blanket statement of just one speculation of any kind is on an equal playing field, no matter how much information is backed up by that speculation.
You haven't seen them do it, therefore you might be able to do it.
Armin can teleport,
wanted to,
and you can't prove he can't.
You can't prove anything.
It's the 1500s. Stiller's a witch. No, I'm not. Prove you're not a witch.
No, all it matters is that by Stiller's logic, we shouldn't have this podcast because 98% of all we do is speculation. So that means why do we talk about any of this? Clearly, it's because our speculation is rooted in what we think.
It's not.
But what are you talking about? But it's what we do, though. Like, I don't understand
we're not.
We speculate with what's going to happen next, but we don't know. But we base our speculation on prior knowledge and inferences and what we think will probably be most likely to happen next. And that's what I'm using.
We're not deriving our own answers as fact because we cannot make facts. We're making these speculations and assumptions because it's conversation and people want to hear the conversation. Not that we're...
And that's what I was doing with the hardening ability. I never said it was fact. I never said it was fact, the hardening ability. Never once did I say...
At all if it's just speculation.
Because you're fighting this point so hard as if it has no grounds or reason. I shouldn't have made that point at all.
Well, there's a difference between baseless speculation and like reasonable speculation, like educated guesses, logical assumptions.
And I think that she just thinks blanket speculation is speculation.
It may be speculation, but I think that Annie being able to harden other things is not a huge jump. I think that based on what we see, I could understand that. Whereas
earlier was that
Reiner's Fountain Wings is baseless.
We haven't seen Aaron actually use this hardening ability on an actual structure to confirm that this power of Annie's that you speculate she has is actually a thing. We don't have the fact that that's actually true. So, I mean, the logic...
Of course, it's why it's speculation.
You're right, we don't have proof yet.
It's somewhat solid. I'm okay with that. It's not totally baseless. But it's still speculation.
It is, okay. That doesn't make it...
There are varying degrees of speculation.
Yes. And this was a hypothetical to begin with, so it's not like I need solid facts for this hypothetical situation.
This is all debating whether we can float off the island or not.
Yeah, literally, like this is all based off of fucking flotation.
How did the discussion start? I can't remember what points we were trying to prove anymore.
It was like Finding Nemo, where we could float away ice cubes.
Yeah, they were gonna float away with ice cubes that were impenetrable, even by what you said. Previous Stiller, nothing can break open the crystal, so then they would be able to float to
right, so this
safety.
Is totally your fault for starting this argument.
I don't care, I'm glad it happened.
Can we move on?
I don't regret this.
Can we just, please, move on? This argument has lasted like 15 fucking minutes.
I had fun.
I am out of fucks to give. Let's move on.
You were never in the conversation. You were just...
This is life or death stuff.
You were just there to distract me. That was the whole point of you being in that conversation. You contributed nothing to it.
Attack on Titan podcast. He's the hard.
You contributed nothing to the subreddit as a moderator.
Ooh. Banhammer time.
Time to earn that trophy.
Mod War.
Okay, so now we can move on to the last question. Hopefully a lighter topic.
That was pretty light.
If that's what we do with the light topic, I quit.
He's talking about light because it was about floating.
Boo. Got it.
The last question is, if you can, each of you guys should choose a song you think matches this chapter of this arc. It can be funny, serious, happy, sad, etc.
I don't know. I feel like we should have some kind of lamentation for Kenny.
Yeah. Let me grab that real quick.
It's a tough one to answer. There's a lot of songs out there.
The Hello Darkness, My Old Friend song.
I had actually... I was thinking of that one.
Yeah.
That one did cross my mind. I was going to go with Hey You by Pink Floyd, too.
Simon and Garfunkel, yeah. Hey, Pink Floyd's a good one, too.
Mad World.
I think I'm going to settle on Lonely Day by System of a Down.
So
I'm trying to think of a clever response. I'm drawing a blank.
I was going with Mad World. that song if you're familiar with it.
That's a good one, yeah.
Because I don't know, I feel like it was a downer, kind of like just how everyone.
We got to say farewell to Kenny. It was a very sad. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, Lamentations.
Zach, what was your song?
The Sound of Silence.
Silence. Okay.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good. That's a pretty good send off to Kenny. I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not sure if I can come up with a better one.
I mean, we could spend all day going through our playlist, but I think that's pretty solid.
The only thing in my playlist is the Attack on Titan soundtrack, the SAO soundtrack, the Madoka soundtrack.
We should go with On the Floor, and that sums up this chapter.
I think Gangnam Style is the appropriate soundtrack.
So that's the end of the Chapter 69 edition of A Cast on Titan. We're getting out of here. We'll see you guys next month on the next edition of A Cast on Titan.
Bye-bye.
Wiedersehen.
Na, 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 na.
Na, 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 na.